You are not going to believe what I'm about to tell you, but reports coming from multiple insider sources now claim that several major U.S. banks have begun preparing behind the scenes for a financial event that could hit far sooner than anyone expected. And if you're holding the Iraqi dinar or following the ongoing global monetary changes, you cannot afford to miss this update. So make sure you tap that like button right now and subscribe, because what I'm about to reveal has the potential to impact millions. Over the last several weeks, quiet shifts have been happening inside the internal structures of several banking institutions in the United States, shifts that are not being publicly announced, but are noticeable to people who work within those systems every single day. These adjustments aren't about customer service updates or technical maintenance. Insiders describe them as unusual recalibrations involving liquidity protocols, regional processing networks, and communication channels between domestic and international settlement layers, and the fact that these changes are happening simultaneously across multiple major banks is raising serious eyebrows. Now, to be crystal clear, no bank has come out publicly to announce that they are preparing for any single specific event, but the timing and coordination of these adjustments have sparked conversations among analysts who have been tracking global currency movements, particularly the developments coming out of Iraq as the country continues positioning itself for a future monetary reform cycle that includes long-planned adjustments to the value of the Iraqi dinar. Many people think that these banking changes are random, routine, or simply a coincidence, but the insiders providing these details are pointing out patterns that do not align with typical operational updates, and that alone makes this moment extremely important to understand. If you look at the broader financial environment, the U.S. banking sector has been under pressure to enhance liquidity management strategies, especially as global markets show increased volatility. And in that context, sudden internal shifts begin to look less like routine updates and more like anticipatory positioning. When multiple banks adjust similar internal systems at the same time, it is often a response to either a regulatory expectation or an upcoming change they expect to absorb, and this is exactly what has people talking. Meanwhile, Iraq continues to take incremental but undeniable steps toward restructuring its currency framework, tightening monetary policy, refining electronic banking, improving compliance standards, and expanding financial linkages with international platforms. And when you compare both sides, the silent preparation inside U.S. banks and the steady progress within Iraq, you begin to see why so many people believe these developments are more connected than they appear. Even though we cannot claim that any bank is directly preparing for an RV, the alignment of timing and actions is creating a surge of interest among those who follow many banking insiders believe a significant event is approaching has less to do with public economic indicators and more to do with the unusual operational behavior happening behind closed doors, where liquidity models, internal communication routes, and settlement timelines are being adjusted in ways that do not resemble normal quarterly or annual updates. And this is precisely what has triggered speculation from those who understand how banks move before major transitions. When a banking system prepares for change, especially one involving currency flows or cross-border valuation shifts, the first signs always appear long before anything becomes public, because banks have to protect themselves, their liquidity pathways, and their ability to maintain seamless operations during turbulence. And right now, the steps being taken suggest that something is being anticipated. Analysts watching these movements have noted that banks sometimes position themselves for changes in monetary conditions, new financial regulations, or shifts in international payment structures, and these are exactly the areas where Iraq has been focusing major updates within its financial sector. Iraq has been expanding digital compliance networks, enhancing transparency across state banking channels, linking more closely with global financial platforms, and steadily moving toward a more internationally compatible monetary framework, which is a necessary step before any larger currency adjustment can occur. And the fact that these reforms are happening at the same time U.S. banking insiders are reporting structural repositioning is difficult to overlook. The Iraqi government has spent years laying the groundwork to modernize its financial system, addressing money laundering concerns, stabilizing monetary policy, and preparing for integration with larger markets. And while none of this confirms an RV on its own, it absolutely aligns with what typically needs to be in place before a significant currency shift becomes possible. As banks prepare for potential shifts in valuation, they often update internal risk systems, liquidity reserves, and cross-border processing rails to avoid bottlenecks or disruptions. And that is exactly the type of quiet movement insiders say they're seeing now. However, it is important to understand that banks do not move early unless there is a reason. And even though no official statement has been made, the synchronized timing suggests that these adjustments are not random. Some insiders believe the upcoming event could involve broader global liquidity restructuring, regulatory rollouts, or financial realignments that indirectly relate to currencies like the IQD or VND, while others think the banking sector may simply be bracing for unexpected volatility. But when this internal activity coincides with Iraq's continuous progress toward monetary reform, the possibility that banks are preparing for an environment in which certain global currencies undergo structural change becomes increasingly realistic. Holders of the Iraqi dinar and Vietnamese dong should view these developments not as hype, but as signals that the global financial landscape is shifting in ways that could eventually create openings for countries like Iraq that have been actively modernizing their financial systems. The key is understanding that these kinds of moves are never announced beforehand, never made publicly, and never explained until after the fact, which is why following insider activity becomes essential. And if you're still here listening carefully, type "I'm watching closely" in the comments, because this next part will help you understand what all of this means. What IQD and VND holders should realistically expect next depends on a combination of banking behavior, global liquidity positioning, and Iraq's ongoing steps to stabilize and modernize its financial structure. And while no one can promise a specific rate or timeline, the alignment of recent developments provides important clues about where things may be heading. For starters, the fact that insiders say banks are adjusting internal systems suggests that financial institutions are preparing for a future in which faster, more efficient settlement processes and stronger liquidity buffers become necessary. And this alone signals that the financial environment is shifting. Meanwhile, Iraq has continued to pursue policies aimed at strengthening its currency foundation, expanding electronic banking infrastructures, tightening regulations to prevent monetary leakage, and aligning its market behavior with international standards, and these intentional steps form the backbone of any long-term revaluation or currency adjustment strategy. IQD and VND holders should focus on realistic expectations, meaning understanding that large-scale monetary reforms do not happen instantly or with dramatic public announcements, but instead unfold gradually through structural upgrades, policy alignment, and coordinated financial positioning across institutions. Based on the behavior being observed, the most reasonable expectation is that Iraq will continue strengthening its financial system, enhancing stability, attracting investment, and improving transparency as prerequisites for any major currency development. For holders of these currencies, this means staying informed, avoiding unrealistic hype, and paying attention to real signals, such as liquidity preparation, banking network updates, and increased international cooperation, because these indicators reflect genuine forward movement. It is also important to note that banks preparing quietly behind the scenes is not a prediction of one single outcome, but a reflection of the broader financial system bracing for shifts, and within that environment, currencies like the IQD that are undergoing structured reform can find opportunities to move towards stronger valuation positions. No one should expect an overnight transformation, but at the same time, the coordinated nature of recent internal adjustments is not something that happens without purpose. So, if you are holding the Iraqi dinar or Vietnamese dong, the smartest next step is simply to stay ready, stay informed, stay patient, and continue watching real, verifiable changes instead of getting distracted by rumors. And before we wrap up this incredibly important update, I want you to take one simple action. Comment below what you think these U.S. banking signals really mean, and whether you believe Iraq's continued reforms are positioning the IQD for a stronger future, and make sure you subscribe and turn on all notifications, because the next report I release could include the biggest